Good evening, folks, and welcome to a late night edition of the Wargiven Racing Podcast. As you can tell, today's podcast is about the upcoming NASCAR season, and NASCAR, for those who are unaware with it, is the stock car racing in North America, primarily the USA, although there are some local series in both Mexico and Canada, as well as there is a European series that runs entirely road courses. Um, More on that later. So, today we will be talking about all three of the main national series in the United States, which is the NASCAR Cup Series, the top series, the F1 of stock car racing, although nowhere near like F1 at all. And then you have the F2 variant, Indy Lights variant, which is the Xfinity series. And then you have the third series, which is the Truck series, the Chaotic series. I like to call it F3 on steroids because if you thought F3 crashes a lot, if that's your neck of the woods, the trucks take it to the next level. But anywho, so now we're gonna move on to talking about the Cup Series, which starts this week actually at the LA Coliseum for the preseason exhibition race, the Busch Clash, which I will talk about some more later. But first, we're just gonna go through some quick background information for those unfamiliar with the Cup Series. So NASCAR has three different manufacturers: Chevy, Ford, Toyota. They all have their own body. They develop their own engines. Well, not the companies themselves. They have companies build. For example, Richard Childress Racing and Hendrick Motorsports combined their engine operations into one continuous group. So they build the engines for most of the Chevy teams. I know for Ford, is it Robert Yates builds the engines for them. Yates used to be a team back in the day, but are no longer. And then Toyota is built by TRD, I believe. But so just running quickly through the teams. So there are charter teams and non-charter teams. A charter, for those unaware, is a document that was given to teams back in 2015 that guarantees them an entry into every single race, no matter what. They could crash in qualifying, doesn't matter. They're guaranteed into every single race. There are 36 of them. So there are 36 full time cars, with I believe 32 of them being just one driver, single car driver, which makes their 32 cars eligible for the playoffs. More to come on that. The charter teams earn the majority of the purse money because that is how NASCAR works. There's no teams championship, it is drivers championship only. And the teams earn money through the normal sponsorship and then where they finish in each race. Some races pay out more. For example, the first points paying race of the season, the Daytona 500, pays out the most. And then it just is a sliding scale of depending on who's where and all that jazz. So, running over the Chevy teams, your major players are Hendrick Motorsports. They are one of the Power 4 teams, although last year it was a Power 3 teams, and the other 2, 3 will come later. So the defending champion, Kyle Larson, and the 2020 champion, Chase Elliott, both drive for Hendrick in the number 5 and the number 9. And then William Byron and Alex Bowman are up-and-coming stars of NASCAR. Bowman won 4 races last year, but had a disappointing traditional points season in the teens. And then William Byron only had 1 win, but his consistency improved a lot last year. JTG Doherty Racing has 1 car with the 47 of Ricky Stenhouse. Stenhouse has driven for them, I believe, for 2 years. This will be his 3rd. They sold their second charter 2 seasons ago to Spire Motorsports, I believe. And they now only run 1 full-time car after running Ryan Preece in the 37 all of last year. Now we move on to the first of several new teams to NASCAR this year, Colleague Racing, which started in the Xfinity Series a few years ago, has now moved up to Cup. They bought 2 charters from Spire Motorsports last season, and they are running 1 car full-time with 3 different drivers, Daniel Hemrick, AJ Allmendinger, Noah Gragson. who you will see a bit later in the Xfinity Series, and then one full-time car with one driver, Justin Haley, who has driven for Kaulig the past few seasons in the Xfinity Series. Kaulig is known for, in the Xfinity Series, being a powerhouse on super speedways, and Justin Haley managed to win a rain-shortened race a few years ago at Daytona. So keep an eye out on them for those style of races. Then we come to the second new team that's kind of new, kind of not. Petty GMS Motorsports. The number 42 is being driven by Ty Dillon, who used to drive for the 13 of Germain Racing that went out of business after the 2020 season. And then the 43 of Eric Jones, who is in his second year with Petty. Now, Petty up until 2022 was Richard Petty Motorsports, but GMS Racing, which is a truck team, the owner of them bought out the majority stakeholder in RPM, and so they merged the two teams into one. They also acquired another charter, I believe, from Rick Ware Racing. So that's how they are fielding two full-time cars with the charters. And hence the reason why it is now Petty GMS Motorsports instead of GMS Racing and Richard Petty Motorsports. They've combined. Then we move on to a traditional staple team of NASCAR, Richard Childress Racing, home of the legendary number 3 that Dale Earnhardt drove with so much success in the late 80s, throughout the 90s, and then into the thousands, with sadly his death being at the 2001 Daytona 500. So they have the same lineup as last year, Austin Dillon in the 3 and Tyler Reddick in the 8. This is Reddick's third year. He will be looking to build off of his impressive sophomore season in which he made the playoffs. Dillon will be hoping to bounce back and make the playoffs after missing out last year. Then we move on to Aspire Motorsports, which had the crazy offseason, as it so often does, with their two cars, the number 7 of Corey LaJoie in his second year with this team. They are one of the teams that were traditionally in the back half of the field before the new car this year, but they're looking to take that new car and ride the wave of momentum into the next era. And then they have their traditional second car, the number 77, which will be split between Landon Castle and Josh Bilicki. Justin Haley drove this car for most of last year, but obviously he's moved to Kaulig, so they've found two new drivers. Then we move to Trackhouse Racing Team, a team founded last year and who Pitbull is a part owner in. Their two drivers are Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. Chastain, this is his first season with the team, as Trackhouse bought the two charters from Chip Ganassi's NASCAR operations last season, effectively taking over them because the 99 had leased a charter from Spire, who then sold it to Kaulig, so they had to get another charter, so they got it from Chip Ganassi, who owned two charters. So Chastain, in his first really full season in a competitive Cup car, did okay. Top 20 finish in points. Had highs, had lows, looking to build off of it. Suarez, first year, new team, strong, consistent season, finished in the top 25 of points, which may not sound great, but for that team, quite impressive. So that wraps up the Chevy teams, of which there are 15 full-time cars. Sorry about that. I'm trying to do some quick mental math. And then we move on to the Fords, which is who I support. I support one of the Ford teams. We'll get to them in a second. So the first Ford team up on the list is Front Row Motorsports. They are a two-car team with two charters. The 34 of Michael McDowell, who is the defending Daytona 500 winner, and his first race win, and he's been in the sport since 2007. So very impressive for him to hold on, be in the right place, right time for that win. So they're looking to build off of the momentum from last season and be like Spire, a team that's, traditionally in the low 20s, high 30s, and push them up into the mid-pack. Then we move on to the 38 of Todd Gilliland, who has driven for Front Row in the Truck Series for the past 2 years, moving up to Cup for his rookie year. Then we move to the second Ford team, which is Live Fast Motorsports. In their second year of operations, co-owner BJ McLeod is their primary driver, although they tend to source out the road courses to other drivers. So we're likely to see at least 2 or 3 other drivers in the 78, meaning they will not be competing for the playoffs. Rick Rowe Racing is now fully a Ford team. They are the team of much memes, as they ran 4 full-time cars last year with 4 charters, and they were significantly off the pace. But this year, having sold 2, having dedicated to Ford, they have a technical alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing. They're going to definitely be at least competing for the mid to low 20s this year. So they have their 15 car, which is their multiple driver car, with David Reagan being there for the Daytona 500, Joey Hand on the road courses, Ryan Preece at 2 races as part of a deal between Stewart-Haas and Rick Ware. Garrett Smith returns for part-time at Rick Ware, and then obviously TBA to other drivers. And then Cody Ware is in the flagship 51 running the full season. Next, we move on to another rebadge team at RFK Racing, or Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, a traditional powerhouse of NASCAR that came in the late 80s, throughout the 90s, and won only 2 championships, but always up in the front of the field. They've since declined in their abilities, but with Brad Keselowski coming in from Team Penske, a Cup champion, multiple-time race winner, really great driver, especially on those super speedways, taking a portion of the team, they're probably going to build back up into a consistent top 10 finisher. So Keselowski's in his first year with the team, in the flagship number 6, replacing Ryan Newman, who has most likely retired from NASCAR, as he is not in an announced seat. And then Chris Buescher is back for his 3rd year in the team in the number 17, hopefully pushing to make the playoffs this season. So now we move to one of the traditional top 4 teams, although last year they were quite bad, with Stewart-Haas Racing. The Haas is the same Haas that runs the Haas F1 team, and he is a co-owner with Tony Stewart, Cup legend, and I believe 3-time champion. So the first of their 4 cars is the 4 of Kevin Harvick, who I support. I have been a Harvick fan since he won the Daytona 500 over 12 years ago. I get the dates confused all the time, but he beat out Mark Martin in a very close race, which is why I remember it to this day. He's always been my guy. Then we move to the 10 of Eric Almirola, who got Stewart-Haas's lone win last season. However, don't let that distract you from the horrible season he had otherwise, as all 3 of these next cars really struggled. And this is actually his final season as a full-time NASCAR driver, having announced that he's going to retire after this season, at least from full-time competition. Then we move on to second-year Chase Briscoe in the 14, who had a disappointing rookie season, but then again, how much of that was the car, how much was him? In 2020, he actually won, I believe, 7 Xfinity races, and in the traditional points format would have been the Xfinity championship, but with the playoff system, he lost out to Austin Cindric. And then we have third-year driver Cole Custer, who had a severe sophomore slump last year, outside the top 25 in points, which is horrible for a Stewart-Haas car. And really, his only highlight of his 2-year career so far has been his win at the Kentucky Motor Speedway, which is no longer on the schedule. So hopefully Cole Custer bounces back, and Stewart-Haas as a whole bounces back this season. Now we move on to a motorsport icon, global name, Team Penske, and their 3-car team. Austin Cindric, son of Tim Cindric, who heads up Team Penske's IndyCar operation, is a rookie in the number 2, replacing Brad Keselowski, who moved over to Roush as a co-owner and driver. Cindric has been in the Championship 4 for the Xfinity Series the last 2 years, winning the 2020 championship and losing on the last lap last year. So he is coming in with high expectations. I would probably say that Cindric will win possibly on the road course this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. But more on playoff predictions in a few minutes. And then we have Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano returning to the team. Blaney won 3 races last year, including the race I was at, which was at Michigan. Joey Logano, seasoned veteran, Cup champion. Not everyone's favorite, but he's a solid driver. So they're expected definitely to make the playoffs. Then we move on to the final 4 team, which is the historic Wood Brothers Racing. Been in the sport since the 50s. Absolutely iconic team, up there with Richard Petty in terms of teams. And I think they're the longest tenured team nowadays in NASCAR, with their iconic number 21, who's being driven by Harrison Burton, another Cup rookie. who has moved up from Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series. Burton won several races in 2020, struggled a bit last year, but he is now a full-time Cup rookie. So now we move on to the final manufacturers, which is the Toyotas, and the smallest group with their first team, 2311, in their second year. 23, the number of the great Michael Jordan, who is a co-owner of this team, and then 11 for the other co-owner, Denny Hamlin, who actually drives for Joe Gibbs. So they are obviously a TRD team. They receive heavy support. They started off last year as a one-car team with the 23 of Bubba Wallace, who did win a race last year. First African-American to win a Cup race since Wendell Scott. Absolutely historic. It was rain shortened. That doesn't mean he didn't deserve it. Bubba Wallace absolutely deserved it, made the move at the right time to win that race. And he's joined by Kurt Busch, another Cup champion, who won in 2004 for Roush, I believe. Yes, for Roush. And he is driving the 45 in their second full-time car. So then we move on to the last of the traditional power group of NASCAR teams, Joe Gibbs Racing. Been in the sport since the 90s, several Cup championships, absolute powerhouse. And they've got an all-star lineup. Probably the best overall lineup in terms of talent and just raw ability. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., all established drivers. Kyle Busch is a two-time champion. Truex is a champion. Denny Hamlin has, I believe, 35 Cup wins, but can't just seem to get that championship done. He's won 3 Daytona 500s, which is extremely hard to do. Those 3 are going to be battling for the championship, no matter what format we're in. And then Christopher Bell, in his second year with Joe Gibbs, his third year overall, he is an up-and-coming star. Little inconsistent last year, so that's probably what he's going to be building on this year is his consistency. Hopefully he picks up another win, this time at a speedway, as his win last year was on the Daytona road course, which is no longer on the schedule. So those are the charter teams. I won't do that for all 3 series, but I figured since it's the Cup Series, I'll go more in depth. Now we go to the non-charter teams, which is there are 4 of them, with a 5th possibly coming. Hasn't been officially announced yet. So Beard Motorsports is a traditional limited schedule part-time team. They run the super speedways. They're going to use Noah Gragson in the first race to run at Daytona to try to qualify for the 500. I would not be surprised if he drives the other 3 super speedway races, as Daniel Hemrick is driving the Kaulig car that Gragson shares. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Gragson drive all 4 super speedways for Beard Motorsports. Then we have one of the new teams, the Money Team Racing, who has been rumored for 3 years now, involved with Floyd Mayweather, and his brands are coming to NASCAR driving the number 50. They have Kaz Gralla, who ran part-time with Kaulig last year with their limited schedule, who ran the super speedways, performed extremely well. Limited experience, can't ever seem to knock down a full-time ride, but he is showing promise for someone that has such limited time. He's confirmed at the moment just for the Daytona 500. And then we come to Team Hezeburg, which is actually a team that is transitioning partially from the NASCAR Euro Series. So it's nice to see a complete road course team like the Hezeburg move over to the Cup Series, which is obviously both. So they have 2 drivers right now in the number 27 Ford. Jacques Villeneuve, the not defending, he hasn't driven an F1 in a while, but an F1 champion, a kart champion, Indy 500 winner. Now he's going to be trying to qualify for the Daytona 500 in just for 2 weeks. Super excited to have them in the sport. Absolutely thrilled that the NASCAR in Europe is growing, at least to the point where 1 car is coming over. Then you have Loris Hezmans, who is a multiple champion in the Euro Series. He will be driving the road courses for Team Hezeburg. And then we have the lovable MPM Motorsports driving the 55 and 66, at least for the Daytona 500. The 66 is their traditional car that runs between half to 3/4 of the season. Hopefully they will improve this year with the new next-gen car. So Timmy Hill will be piloting that car for the 500. So want to move into talking about the next gen. So the next gen is NASCAR's 7th generation car. Before now, NASCAR teams have built their cars hands, like ground up. They built all the parts, they assembled the cars, and then they'd lease them or sell them to different teams depending on who. They typically would sell older models and so on and so forth. So that created a natural caste system where you had your Joe Gibbs, you had your Hendricks up at the front. Then you had your Wood Brothers, your front row, your Roush lately, your Petty Motorsports, your JTG. Then you had your back markers, which was Rick Ware, MBM, so on and so Live Fast last year, Spire Motorsports. So they've moved to the next gen car, which is now a stock chassis in the sense that there's a manufacturer, I believe it's Dallara, that builds the chassis, and other companies build those parts. So now the teams aren't making the parts. They still assemble the cars. They still work on them. Each manufacturer has their own specific body on the car, but there's no longer that that manufacturing component that the teams have to do. So they look a lot like a GT3 car without the wing, the back wing. They just run a spoiler, which is just a blade that comes off the back of the car. They will be running 670 horsepower at all tracks minus Daytona and Talladega, I believe, which use restrictor plates to keep the speeds close to 200, if not below 200 for safety reasons. They are moving away from the four-speed gearbox to a 5. It's a revolutionary car that will take NASCAR to a more modern step where instead of only having 2 road courses on the schedule, you have 6. You're driving on dirt. The variety, the car's meant to be more adaptable. Before, where you needed a short track car and a super speedway car and a speedway car to run those 3 races, now you maybe need 1 car to run the super speedway, 1 car to run the speedway, and then that super speedway car could be transitioned into a short track car. That wasn't possible before. You wouldn't think of doing that unless you were a smaller team, just because of the performance. So hopefully we see the costs come down because of that, as teams are limited. So a team in NASCAR is the overall organization, and then you have race teams, which is the number 11 team, and the 18 team, and the 19 team. So each car team can have 7 cars, 7 chassis at one time. So now that I got that out of the way, we're going to move on to the schedule with the Clash coming up this week. So the Clash through the first 16 races are going to be on Fox in the United States and Fox Sports 1. Major highlights, the Daytona 500, the crown jewel, the biggest race. That is on February 20th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that would be, I believe, 7:30 UCT. Then we move into the West Coast swing, which goes to Auto Club Speedway, Las Vegas, Phoenix, before we come back to the southeast of the country for Atlanta, who has a new track configuration. They've steepened up the banking. They've made it narrower, more full speed. We'll see how that goes. It definitely needed a repave. The reconfiguration, I'm still iffy on. Then we go to Circuit of the Americas, which moved up in the calendar after being in May last year, and it was the scene of some crazy crashes because of the weather. Then we go to Richmond, Martinsville, Bristol for 3 straight back-to-back short tracks, although Bristol is now a dirt race. Second year for that. It's on Easter Sunday. I would highly recommend watching it because it's kind of crazy. I'm on the fence about it still because I love traditional Bristol. I love short track racing. If they could somehow do 3 races there, I would be all for it, but it's not feasible. Okay. Then we get on to the second crown jewel, the Geico 500, which is at Talladega Superspeedway, a 2.67-mile superspeedway, which is always a fan favorite. Then we go to Dover and then Darlington for the throwback weekend if you are a fan of paint schemes. The first Darlington race in May, watch it. Tons of throwback schemes, always a classic, always fun looking at all of them. Then we head to Kansas for their first race, and then Texas for the All-Star race. Then the third crown jewel, the longest race, a 600-mile affair at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. that is always a bit of a haul to watch. But I always enjoy watching it because it's the same day as the Indy 500, same day as the Monaco Grand Prix. So if you are a racing nut like I am, you can wake up in the morning, you can watch Monaco, then you can watch the Indy 500, which I'm actually going to this year. Pumped for that. Um, I can't wait for that. And then I'll be listening to the Coke 600 on the way home. Then they head to Gateway, which is Worldwide Technology Raceway, which has hosted IndyCar and Truck Series races, but not a Cup Series race for its first Cup Series race. And then to round off Fox's, it is at Sonoma Raceway. And then the final half is all covered by NBC Sport, or NBC in the U.S. So it starts off in Nashville, then Road America for July 4th, then another Atlanta, New Hampshire, Pocono, which is unique because it's a triangle. Then you have the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course. And if you can't hear by the tone of my voice, it's depression because they took the race off the oval and put it on the road course, and I hate that. But nonetheless, we move on. Then you go to Michigan, closest track to me. Went to that race last year. Sadly, can't go this year. Fantastic, fantastic environment, though. Then we go back to Richmond, then to Watkins Glen, and then to round off the regular season, we hit Daytona for its second race, the night race, the Coke Zero Sugar 400. So, quick transition from the schedule to what the playoffs are. The playoffs are a system that was first implemented in 2004 as the chase, then changed throughout the years until our current format, which is if you win a race, if you're one of the full-time drivers, you drive every race of the first 26, and you win a race, you are qualified for the playoffs. If there aren't 16 individual winners, you take the next highest person in points. Traditional points that are earned through every race, through the stages, which are typically about 30%. It's like 30, 30, 40. And you can earn points during that, which go towards your traditional points. Excuse me. And then the top 16 in points, or say there's 9 winners and then the top 7 in points, make it to the playoffs. Last year there were 14 winners with 2 making, or correction, there were 13 winners with 3 drivers making it in on points. And then every win gives you so many playoff points, and it resets. It's complicated. I'll cover that more later when we get to it. I just wanted to. This is how NASCAR does their championship. All 36 cars, 40 cars still are racing during the playoffs, but only 16 can win the championship. So then we hit NASCAR's final crown jewel, debated in my opinion because I think there's another one, but officially the Southern 500. Second time at Darlington, this time under the lights, Labor Day weekend. Spectacular race. Absolute classic. Darlington is probably the toughest track to drive as just a hot lapping around. Absolutely fantastic to watch. Highly recommend if you're able to stay awake for that race. Then we go to Kansas for the second time. Then we have the Bristol night race. This is on the half-mile asphalt compared to half-mile dirt. Another fantastic race. If you like beating, banging, short-track action, Bristol night race is where it's at. Then we head to Texas, which is But anyways, so after those first 3, 4 drivers are eliminated. To move on, you either have to be the top 12 in points or you have to win a race to move on. So in the round of 12, you have Texas for a 500-mile race. You have Talladega for its second race of the year, which is always a bit of a wild card. This is the wild card round because you have that super speedway in it, and then you have a road course. So back in, I believe, 2016, SMI, who owns Charlotte Motor Speedway, decided, hey, we're not seeing attendance on our second traditional 1.5-mile oval race. We're going to change it up. And they created an infield road course, much like the Daytona road course, and NASCAR races there now every season for the second Charlotte race. It's actually a good race. I enjoy watching the Roval if I can catch it. And it's a great, as much as I dislike the playoffs, it's great to see it be that cutoff race because it's a bit of a wild card. There's drama. And it's nice to see that drama, at least. So then after that, if you win, you move on. If you finish in the top 8 of points, you move on, or top 7, depending on how many win. You move on to the final round before the championship, which is the round of 8, in which we go to Las Vegas for the second time, to Miami for its one and only race, and then to the second Martinsville race, which is fantastic short track racing again. beating and banging as the remaining 8 drivers try to make the Championship 4. Championship 4, all 4 drivers that are in it race each other and against the field, and the highest of those 4 win the championship at Phoenix. I'm not going to go into my opinions about the playoff system. I'll do that at a later date. But anywho, so now we're going to take a quick look at my playoff predictions for the Cup Series. So, my locked in drivers. These 8 drivers will for sure make the playoffs. If they don't, they're probably not returning next season at their teams. So you have the defending champion in Kyle Larson, the 30-some-time race winner Denny Hamlin, always consistently up there in average finish. You've got the 2020 champion Chase Elliott. You've got Kevin Harvick, despite not winning a race last year, he made it to the round of 12. You have Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex. So you have 3 of the 4 Gibbs cars in my predictions. Kevin Harvick at Stewart Haas, 2 of the Penske drivers, and then 2 Hendrick drivers. Those are my locked-in, stamp it, send it predictions for the playoffs. Then we have the should make it in. It will be a disappointing season if they don't, and that is William Byron at Hendrick Motorsports. He's looking to build off of the season that saw him get his first win last year. Then you have Brad Keselowski in his first season as a co-owner/driver for Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. And then Kurt Busch in his first season at 2311 Racing. He's always consistent, wins 1 race a year. He'll make the playoffs. Alex Bowman, and Christopher Bell, 1 races last year. Consistency is going to be their key this year. They had a disappointing season outside of their wins, in my opinion. So hopefully they can build that consistency. So now all 4 Hendrick, all 4 Gibbs cars are in the playoffs. So before I go to my final 3, some honorable mentions. I believe Eric Jones in the 43 Petty GMS Motorsports car will be close. I don't think he'll win a race. He may eke one out on the super speedway, but I can see him having a top 20 in points. I believe that Bubba Wallace will have a stronger season, a more consistent season, which he finishes in the top 20. Again, he's really strong on super speedway, so I wouldn't rule him out to be a surprise winner. I just don't think he's going to do it again this year. Michael McDowell in the 34, strong on road courses, strong on super speedways. I just don't think the luck will fall his way to have him win a race. And then my final honorable mention is Justin Haley, first-year driver, Colleague Racing, new team. Even though they won a race last year with A.J. Allmendinger in the part-time car, I think he's a threat at the super speedways, but he hasn't developed in the other aspects as well, as all of his Xfinity wins are at super speedways. Oh, and sorry, my final shout-out is to Austin Cindric. Could absolutely win a road course out of nowhere. Could dominate. He was running well last year at the part-time road courses he did. I just don't think he will make it. So our final 3 are Chase Briscoe, who recovers from a poor year last year, uses his good road course knowledge and his overall strong racing skills in the better car this year to make the playoffs. Then I have Ross Chastain from Trackhouse. I believe he will point his way in, if not win a super speedway. Chastain has that aggressive edge more so than the other drivers that are good at super speedways. And I believe if he's in the opportunity to win a race like the Daytona 500, he's going to full send it, and I think he's going to pick up his first Cup win this year. Then we have Tyler Reddick, who, despite having a slow start to the beginning of last year, ended up making the playoffs. I believe he will point his way in again this year. I don't see Richard Childress winning a race this year unless it is a fuel mileage or something like that. So, wrapping up the Cup Series, and now we shall move on to the second tier of the Xfinity Series. So, looking at the Xfinity Series, they have, I believe, right now confirmed 35 4 full-time cars. I'm not going to go in depth about them as there's too many of them to really go into depth. But new teams are Alpha Prime Racing with their 2 cars that have a multitude of drivers. Returning single car teams, Big Machine, Brandon Bill, who got their first win last year, seen of multiple controversies afterwards. Not going to talk about that. DGM Racing, a traditional Xfinity mid-pack team, along with JD Motorsports. Jeremy Clements Racing, a one-car family-owned team, made the playoffs last year, looking to push on to make it again this year, pick up a win. Jimmy Means, a traditional backmarker Xfinity team. Jordan Anderson Racing, in their second year, now has a full-time driver after running several cars part-time last year. Then you come to the first of the powerhouse Xfinity teams, Junior Motorsports, owned by NASCAR legend Dale Jr., or Dale Earnhardt Jr., and they have 4 full-time cars with a part-time car that Junior and Miguel Paludo will be sharing for select races. So Sam Mayer, Allgaier, Barry, Gregson, all very talented drivers. Then we move on to Colleague Racing, who now have both a Cup and Xfinity program with Landon Castle, Daniel Hamrick, and AJ Allmendinger. Our Motorsports with returning Brett Moffitt and then newcomers Alfredo and Burton. Richard Childress Racing has Sheldon Krieg and Austin Hill, who are truck veterans and have moved up for the first full season in Xfinity. Then we come to the Ford selection, which is very small. Chevy's the most dominant manufacturer in the Xfinity series. You have Ryan Sieg Racing, who has a full-time car with multiple drivers, and then the 39 of Ryan Sieg full-time. Joe Graff Jr. is running full-time for SS Greenlight Racing with a part-time car with some Cup guys and then other drivers. Haley Deegan is rumored possibly to go to this team for a few races this season. Then you have Stuart Haas's Cup or Xfinity presence with the 98 of Riley Herbst. Herbst had a very disappointing season last year, but he's hoping to build off of it this season. Now we move to Toyota, which only has 2 cars fully confirmed this season, but most likely will have at least 4 full-time, with the 19 of Brandon Jones returning to Joe Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, who won, I believe, 4 races last year in his part-time rookie season for the Xfinity Series, will be full-time. They just haven't announced it yet, in a second car. And then Joe Gibbs runs it was the 54 last year. Don't know what number will be this year, but their all-star car in which they have their Cup guys come down and race in it, as well as a few other select drivers. Xfinity rules and truck rules are that Cup Series drivers or a higher series, so Xfinity to truck, can race 5 races in each series without having to declare points, like what their series they're racing for points in. And then we come to the final Toyota team at the moment, Sam Hunt Racing, running full-time with 4 different drivers throughout the season. Then we come to some new team, traditional team in BJ McLeod Motorsports, who runs 2 cars full-time with 1 driver, and then a third car with part-time drivers. A new team this year, Emmerling Gase Motorsports, is been founded by Joey Gase and Patrick Emmerling, both traditional NASCAR part-timers now forming their own team to run full-time. Jesse Iwuji Motorsports is a new team this year with the backing of NFL legend Emmett Smith for Jesse Iwuji, who has run part-time and Xfinity, but mainly trucks in the past. Then we move on to MBM Motorsports, who with their Xfinity program is their main focus, and they have Timmy Hill, at least for 1 race, in their flagship 66. And then we move on to the part-time cars, the 77 of Bassett Racing. Mike Harmon Racing has 2 cars that ran full season last year. We'll see what they'll be able to do this year. The previously mentioned Dale Jr. car, the 88, and then part-time from Miles Thomas, Ryan Sieg, and then the Toyotas of Sam Hunt and SQR, with Emmerling Gase and MBM Motorsports running several races with different manufacturers with their part-time cars. So their schedule is primarily the same as NASCAR, just shorter distances. Notable differences is that they are going to Portland International Raceway for the first time since I believe the late 90s when the Truck Series went there. And they shall be there the same weekend that NASCAR is at Sonoma. And that is pretty much it. Everything else is a support race of a Cup Series race. So looking quickly at their playoff predictions, I I have AJ Allmendinger from Colleague, Daniel Hemrick, the defending champion from Colleague, Sheldon Creed in his first time season. He is a truck champion, so I expect him to do well. Brett Moffitt ran extremely well last year in the R Motorsports. Would have made the playoffs if he had committed to Xfinity points from the beginning of the season. He switched about 9 races in, and it cost him a playoff spot. Brandon Jones will return to the playoffs with the Joe Gibbs team. Justin Allgaier, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, 3 of the junior motorsports cars will most certainly make it. Landon Castle in his debut season with Colleague will make it. And then my surprise, well, not Ty Gibbs, but Ryan Sieg and Jeremy Clements for their family-owned teams will be my surprise to Xfinity playoff guys, with Ty Gibbs rounding out the playoffs in 12th. So now, after taking a quick look at Xfinity, we will go to the Truck Series. So the third tier of the NASCAR pyramid started off in the late 90s. They run the major truck chassis of of the manufacturers. So it's the Chevy that's Ford. I believe it's the Chevy Silverado, the Ford F-150, Toyota. I don't remember the chassis. To me, it's not that important. It's a Chevy, it's a Ford, it's a Toyota. So they have right now about 26 full-time cars confirmed. Chevy, Toyota are the major powers here. Ford, not really. So the major rookies here are Dean Thompson, Lawless Allen, who are in their first full seasons. Colby Howard, after running a few Xfinity seasons, has moved down to trucks full-time. And then Matt DiBenedetto is now racing full-time for Rackery WAR after being dropped by the Wood brothers after last season. So favorites from this group, GMS Racing with Grant Enfinger, instant championship favorite. Then you have the McCauley Higgleman Racing. They will be competing for those final playoff spots, and then all of the Nice Motorsports cars will be fighting for them, as well as the Rackley WAR 25. And Young Motorsports, a team that won their first race, I believe, last year with Tate Fogelman, now has 2 full-time cars, dropping down from 3 last year. One of their cars is the returning Spencer Boyd, and then Jesse Little and Kaz Gralla are splitting the other truck. And then we move on to Ford, who has the same lineup in David Gilliland racing. David Gilliland is the father of Todd Gilliland, who's racing for Front Row and Cup this season, with Haley Deegan returning to the number 1 and Tanner Gray returning to the 15. And then the 17 for DGR is a rotation of Ryan Preece, Taylor Gray, and most likely some Cup drivers. And then moving over from GMS last year to the Front Row Motorsports truck team is Zane Smith. And he will definitely be competing for the championship for this season. Then we come to Toyota, who has the new team Glory to God Racing that will field 2 trucks with Matt Jaskell, and then the combination of Johnny Solider, Roger Roos, and Tim Vaines. Then we have Halmer Friesen Racing with Stuart Friesen back again. Friesen absolutely should have been in the championship for last year, but unfortunately at Martinsville got wrecked out. So he'll be strong again. Hopefully they break through to win a race this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but he's always Mr. Consistency in the truck series. Then we move on to Hattori Racing Enterprises, who are expanding to a 2-truck team this year, taking 2 of the drivers from GMS Racing, Tyler Ankrum and Chase Purdy. They most likely will be competing for that final playoff spot. And then Timmy Hill is racing the number 56 for his own team, Hill Motorsports. Hill Motorsports has been part-time the last few years. This is really their first full-time effort in a little bit, and he will be competing most likely for a top 20 points finish. Now we come on to the truck team powerhouse of KBM, Kyle Busch Motorsports, with the number 4 flagship of John Hunter Nemechek. Absolutely dominated the first half of last year. Fell off a bit, but in the traditional points would have been champion. Unfortunately, did not work out for him in the playoffs. And then Chandler Smith, who won 2 races last year in his rookie campaign, is returning in the 18. And then the 51 will be majority driven by Corey Heim, who drove limited schedule for them last year, as well as team owner Kyle Busch's 5 races. He will win 4 out of those 5, and then TBA for the final 3. The small Toyota team of On Point Motorsports is running full-time this season with Tate Fogelman, who won the Talladega race last year for Young Motorsports. And then we move on to the other truck powerhouse at Toyota, Thor Sport Racing, who have defending champion Ben Rhodes, as well as 2-time champion Matt Crafton, and then Christian X returning to full-time after running part-time last year with them. And they shall have a 4th truck in the 13 that will be announced later. Riem Brothers Racing, back marker team, they run at least 1, possibly 2 cars part-time. So now we move on to the part-time teams. Really of note, Spire, Orm, Benning, and Hill and Henderson will be the cars that show up, or the trucks that show up for multiple races. Young's Motorsports might have a more expanded schedule with Danny Bone and Leyland Honeyman. It just depends. These guys will all try to qualify for the first race of the season at Daytona. But the trucks only have 36 in the field compared to 38 in Xfinity and 40 in Cup. So now looking at their schedule, the main highlights are Daytona at the start of the season, Circuit of the Americas. They do race at Bristol Dirt, as well as a second dirt race at Knoxville Raceway in Knoxville, Iowa, a legendary dirt track. They also race at Gateway in near St. Louis, even though it's in Madison, Illinois. It's across the river from St. Louis. And then they actually start their playoffs earlier in July, while the other 2 series start their playoffs in September. And they start with Lucas Oil Raceway, which returns to the schedule for the first time in several years. And then they just have 3 rounds, as they only have 10 drivers make the playoffs, so it goes 10, 8, 4. And the final 4 races of their schedule match up pretty well with the correction. No, they don't. But Bristol, Talladega, Homestead, staples on all 3 schedules. The Truck Series also goes to Mid-Ohio, replacing the Xfinity Series race that went there, as Xfinity now goes to Portland. So I'm trying to go to that race, as that's the local track near me in terms of NASCAR-ish, but not Cup Series races. So quickly just taking a look at who I've predicted to make their playoffs to round out tonight. I have Grant Enfinger for GMS. No surprise. He ran part-time last season in a substandard CR9 truck, and then the remainder of the season with Thor Sport. Again, would have made the playoffs if he raced in every race. He missed 2 of them, so sadly was not eligible. Zane Smith for Front Row. After a Championship 4 appearance last year, he will be looking to kick on and win one this year. John Hunter Nemechek obviously will want to make up for the disappointing finish to the season last year by winning this season. Chandler Smith will qualify again. He's always clutch. He won the final race of the round of 10 and the round of 8 to run the final. Oh my gosh. He won the final round of 10 race. He almost won the final round of 8 race, and then he won the championship race. But since he wasn't in the championship 4, didn't win the championship. Then I have the Thor Sport guys of Crafton, X, and Rhodes. If 3 of the 4 trucks from Thor Sport don't make it, it's a disappointing season for them. I don't see why Crafton and Rhodes, Crafton the consistency, Rhodes the absolute talent, and then X, who has talent but was only part-time last year. X got a win at Las Vegas last year. I can't see any of those 3 not making it. Mr. Consistency, Stuart Friesen will make it again on points, if not one single win. Carson Hocevar will make the playoffs again for Nice Motorsports, being the only Nice truck to make it, although I expect the other three NASCAR trucks, full-time trucks, to be competitive, be close around that top 10. And then finally, Matt DiBenedetto at Rackley WAR. He has to make the playoffs. I mean, his truck is a mid-pack truck, but he's got to make it. A multiple Cup year veteran. I mean, he's my final pick because he should be beating these. I mean, granted, there are some older veterans that dedicate their lives to the truck series, like Matt Crafton, but he should be realistically in the playoffs when he's facing a lot of younger talent that hasn't fully matured. He should have that maturity. He should have that pace. He should be able to make the playoffs. So, moving on to the final thing on the docket for tonight is the clash at the LA Coliseum. Just wanted to run through this quickly for those not familiar. So this is this Sunday, the 6th of February. It will be on Fox in the United States. And this is a quarter-mile short track built inside of a football stadium, the iconic LA Coliseum, which is the home of the USC Trojans, a very large football school in the United States, as well as has hosted the Summer Olympics twice. So, this is what it looks like when it was being constructed. As you can see, the dirt is where that track is going to be. It's finally laid down and whatnot. So as this says, oh, wait, I thought the Daytona 500 is the first race. Correct. It's the first points-paying race. This is the traditional warm-up race exhibition that NASCAR likes to hold to kick off the season. Now, traditionally, it's been at Daytona, but now it has moved to the LA Coliseum. So the main race will be at 6 o'clock on Sunday. There will be heat qualifying races early on in the day, I believe 3 p.m. EST, that will set the grid, the final grid for the feature race. The feature race is 150 laps. Caution laps will not count towards that, so it should be a very interesting race as these new cars, which you can see here, the next-gen car, are quite large. And it's going to be lots of beating and banging because there ain't much room for 23 cars on track. So all of the full-time cars have entered with, I believe, the 60... No, okay. So there's, I believe, 40 drivers available. I don't think all 40 will be there. I think it's the 36 charter teams. So, yes, the 36 charter teams. So, to qualify, this lovely info sheet has it here. They will do single car qualifying tomorrow. Heat races will be set by that. The top finishers, the top 4, will qualify automatically for the main race, with the rest of the field going into last chance qualifiers. Top 3 move on. Then you've got your 22 qualifiers, and then the final qualification spot goes to the highest points position driver from last season that isn't in the main race. And then they race 150 laps on the short quarter-mile track, and that's that. Will it be good? Who knows? I mean, this has never been done before. NASCAR hasn't raced on a track this small since the 50s, I think. So, hopefully it's a good show. I wouldn't take it for anything more than just an entertaining race, just to be there, be different, and I'm all for that. I'm excited that they're going there. I hope they rotate it. There's been rumors that if this is successful, they'll keep it there. I kind of want to see the Clash be a rotation. They should rotate around the country. I mean, there's so many states. If you're paying $1 million in LA, I mean, surely you could pay $1 million to get into New York. Surely you can pay $1 million to go to, I don't know, to somewhere in Texas. Put it. Not that Jerry Jones will ever let his stadium be used as a racetrack, but put it in a stadium in Texas. Do something like that. There's a stadium that hosts this type of racing in North Carolina. That's a traditional home of this quarter-mile type of racing. Go there. I mean, upgrade it, sure, but go there. You know, routes, just rotate. I want to see this Clash be rotated. but I'm pumped for the start of the season this year. Um, if you've made it to this point in the stream, I applaud you. Um, so if you liked what you heard, if you've got any thoughts, leave them in the comment section. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you want to see more motorsports content. Monday will be a wrap up of the Clash, as that's the really the only main motorsports going on this weekend that I specifically follow. And then more to come with Fast Car. Um, if you want to see how the Clash works, um, last year's Clash version of the Clash, which was at Daytona, is on the channel with the 2021 Fast Car Series. If you want to see how the duels for upcoming speed weeks for Daytona um, work, that is also on the Fast Car season, as well as the 500. Um, that's all been uploaded and streamed in the past. So if you want to check that out to kind of get familiar with the process, I invite you to do so. Also on Monday, I will go over Speed Weeks, which is the week before the Daytona 500. I'll give some of my predictions, how to watch the qualifying, how to watch the duels, how to watch the race, so on and so forth. And yeah, I'm really excited. It's been a long, long, long 3-4 months, and I'm pumped to finally get NASCAR's next gen era, Gen 7 era started. Um, so yeah, that's all from me today, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that everyone has a fantastic evening.